Hey there, how's it going? Welcome back to this, the show on the internet. I am your host, a guy with a microphone. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about something that I really enjoy and have really enjoyed for a long time, and that is anime. Anime is very interesting. You either really like it or you really don't like it, I feel like. It is very polarizing, and I think that is in part because it is from a completely different culture than our own, in the US at least, but doesn't mean that we can't enjoy it, and I definitely enjoy it. So I wanted to talk about some of my favorite anime. I'm going to be talking about some movies and some shows. I'm not going to be talking about games or visual novels in this episode, just movies, just shows. I might talk about games and visual novels later down the line, but for this, it's just gonna be shows and movies. Now, what I'm going to define as anime is very specific. A show like Avatar: The Last Airbender is not anime for me in this context. It takes a lot of influence from anime in what it does, but I would not consider it anime. Same goes with Ruby, RWBY. If you don't know what that is, that's okay, that's a good thing. At least for my own purposes, I'm just gonna be saying anime or manga is created by Japanese author or a studio to intentionally be considered as anime. So, I'm not going to talk about the history of anime because I feel like that would be way too complex for me to get into, way too long. So I'm just gonna start in about the 2000s. So once upon a time, in years long past, ancient history, circa the mid-2000s, anime was a very niche thing to be interested in. There were a lot of anime that were big at that point that were available in the US, like Naruto, Dragon Ball, Bleach, kind of. I don't really know much about Bleach, but I know it's big. Got Pokemon, that kind of thing. There weren't many that were well known beyond those. If you were interested in anime back in these days, you really didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about being interested in anime or anime that you're excited about, because it was just kind of weird back then to watch anime. Everyone thought it was just for kids, because, animation must be for kids, right? Wrong. Instead of saying that you liked anime, maybe you said something like, you like cartoons, animation, as if you're just trying to get the point across, like, you like that kind of thing, but you don't want to specifically say anime, you might say that. A few of the anime, I guess, that could be openly discussed were some of the ones that I mentioned, like Pokemon, Dragon Ball. There's also Yu-Gi-Oh!, just because that was also a game, so Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Were pretty acceptable, because it was also a game, so it didn't really matter. Dragon Ball, I think, was just kind of accepted and was cool. Little did many people know, Beyblade was also actually an anime, and not just a really cool toy that someone happened to come up with. I love Beyblade. I watched the Beyblade animes. Yes, multiple animes. And they are really funny in very unique ways. I really loved the part where they retconned the splitting of the Red Sea when they split the Red Sea with the Beyblade. That's one of my favorite parts. I think that is really funny. So social media was understandably not as popular or widespread during these days. If you didn't have the internet, you didn't have social media. So if you had the internet, maybe you knew about it. So during these days, information about new shows didn't come often. There wasn't hype surrounding different seasons of anime coming up, or anime that are releasing, like happens today. There was definitely merch surrounding some anime. That was definitely a thing. Again, with like Pokemon, there were always, like, for example, Happy Meal toys would have stuff from Pokemon. And in the kids' mind, they're just like, oh, this is a toy, cool toy. But I mean, technically it's from an anime. Well, technically I believe the anime was created in order to get people to buy the games more. It wasn't originally the anime, it was the game. But you get the point. Merch about anime existed, and it was in the US. Getting access to anime was not exactly easy, or wasn't mainstream, through something like Crunchyroll, which you can get a lot of access to anime that you want to watch. You had to basically rely on someone else making it available, translating it, maybe putting subtitles, usually in a not so legal manner. We had 4Kids dubs, which were very specific to anime like Pokemon or Dragon Ball or Yu-Gi-Oh!, Beyblade, those types of acceptable anime. So past that, there really wasn't much in American culture surrounding anime. Those shows were already sort of mainstream, I think. The US market as a whole was not untapped per se. The medium of anime existed, and it had a small subsection of dedicated fans, but it was hardly widespread. Compared to now, of course. You didn't hear anybody going around talking about the latest show or recent episode, because barely anyone knew what anime was. If you go up and talk to your friend who doesn't know what anime was, you start talking about this recent episode, they're like, what are you talking about? What show is this? It's animated? You mean it's for kids? Because that's where it typically went. During some of the 2010s, anime was still considered cringe and for weirdos. A lot of people especially utilized the word weeb, weeaboo, as a blanket insult for somebody that enjoyed anime or just that type of animated thing. Surprise, surprise, the word weeb started on 4chan. People still say it till this day, they still use it, but I feel like it doesn't have as much oomph as it used to. There is now, though, a very specific subsect of the internet, I think, that complains about anime and its surrounding culture. Realistically, there's always going to be some disconnect between anime culture and the overseas audiences, because our popular culture does not involve anime. We might like animation or animated things, but we don't specifically like anime. In my opinion, somewhere within the 2010s, there was a notable shift in attitude that began to make its way through the general online community regarding anime. A lot of anime started being adapted at this point from manga into an actual show, and I think people started catching on to that, and they started watching more anime as a result. This shift revolved around a choice few anime, in my opinion, that grabbed the attention of the general populace, and it was their introduction to anime. I think the show that had the most influence on people's perspective was Attack on Titan. That's just what I think. And it definitely wasn't immediate, like Attack on Titan didn't come out and everyone was like, anime's cool now. No, it took a while. But I think Attack on Titan was really important. As a result of how visceral and shocking Attack on Titan's content is, if you've watched it or seen it or heard of it, you probably know what I'm talking about. This perceived notion that I was mentioning, that anime was for kids or was lame in terms of content, just completely flew out the window. Attack on Titan first released in 2013, and so that was its release in Japan, and it was eventually dubbed in 2014, I believe. And it got very popular very quickly. There were people that were actively looking forward to new episodes, speculating aspects of the show, talking about when a new season might come out if the current one had ended, what might happen in the new season. Beyond even that, there were people who were unsatisfied with having to wait for more of the anime, if a season had ended and they started to read the manga instead, just to consume Attack on Titan content. I know this because I was one of those people. I was not satisfied having just finished season 2 of Attack on Titan, and I wanted to consume more. It had hooked me. So I found some website somewhere to start reading the manga, and eventually I finished it, even before, I think even the 3rd season was completely out, way before the 4th season was even completed, or maybe even started. So those first 2 seasons really hooked me in and made me want to watch more. I think that happened with a lot of people, but maybe not everybody. People were fine waiting for the anime, I think. Another show I think that was important is My Hero Academia. I think it became really popular as an intro series to the world of anime. It's still popular to this day, recently ended. So I think it is very widespread in more mainstream online culture. It definitely still exists. Although I'm arguing that Attack on Titan really jump-started this switch up in popular culture surrounding anime, I think it's important to note that there were always series that had always just sort of been popular with other countries. Specifically, I'm going to mention Dragon Ball and One Piece, 2 series that had long been somewhat present in the landscape of media overseas. Dragon Ball is wildly popular in some Spanish-speaking countries, at least from what I've seen. It had always somewhat had a presence in the US, so I think Dragon Ball is really just sort of widely accepted as really cool. It's been around for a long time, and its content was unique enough and cool enough to garner that attention from overseas audiences. Then there's One Piece. The Jolly Roger from One Piece is recognizable across the entire world seemingly, and is even used to this day in countries as a sign of rebellion, which I think is awesome. The fact that you can just hold up the straw hat flag and people take that as a sign of rebellion, I think that's super cool to be able to talk about and like claim in terms of like culture surrounding anime. Guides for accessing and watching One Piece are very available now to people wishing to consume One Piece, because if you don't know much about One Piece, there's a lot of episodes. There's well over 1,000 episodes, so not everybody's gonna watch all of those episodes, because oh my gosh, 1,000 episodes is a lot. So now there's guides that are out that show you how to engage with most of the important content and skip most of the filler. Some people would argue that they skip over some important arcs. I would probably agree with that. But for the most part, there's a lot of filler in there that you can just sort of ignore. So now that's available for people. Fast forward to the 2020s, Attack on Titan is still wildly popular. It does collaboration events with multiple other games. Not to mention that there are multiple Attack on Titan games themselves, so it's definitely very well known now. The anime that have collaborated with Fortnite, at least once, to my knowledge, include Attack on Titan, Naruto, Dragon Ball, Jujutsu Kaisen, My Hero Academia, and One Punch Man. And everybody knows that if you've collaborated with Fortnite, you sort of made it. You have made it to the big screen. You're in the public consciousness now. There is now a much larger community around the medium of anime that's actively keeping up with new releases, new adaptations, anime news in general, shows that they might want to get adapted, people sharing their favorite manga. I think that this community surrounding anime in the US and overseas countries in general is only going to get bigger from this point onwards. I don't think it will specifically trump standard TV like sports or your comedy shows. I don't think it's going to be bigger than that, but I think it's definitely going to keep getting bigger. Now I would like to talk about some movies that I really enjoyed, and there's a lot that I would like to talk about, but my script was way too long when I included all of the things that I talked about, so I had to cut out a lot of things. If there is a part 2 to this, maybe I can do that, but for now, I'm just gonna be talking about these choice ones. The first movie that I want to talk about is called Weathering with You. Weather spelled like, the weather, like rain. This movie, oh my goodness, it is genuinely one of the sweetest, most beautiful, fantastical, interesting, heart-wrenching, heart-warming pieces of media I have ever had the pleasure of watching. I love this movie so much. The concept for the movie is not just interesting, it makes you really think because of how impactful the plot would be in a real-world scenario. In the movie, Japan is the setting, and it's experiencing constant, and I mean constant rainfall that threatens to drown the city of Tokyo, and even further beyond. So Japan might go underwater in this movie if the rain keeps up as it currently is for a long period of time. Our main protagonist, Hodaka, arrives in Tokyo after he runs away from his home at, I believe, 17, trying to make a new life for himself. He is very unsatisfied with his life back home, so he says, I'm going to go to the mainland and figure stuff out there, which is very difficult, I think, for a minor to do. And that's one of the problems he has to deal with throughout the movie, the fact that he is still a minor, and technically he shouldn't be in Tokyo on his own without his family, trying to get work and that kind of thing. So people treat him very differently because he's younger. Our other protagonist, Hina, lives alone with her little brother. She's, I believe, 15 during the movie, but she turns 16 later. She claims to be 18 in order to get work, so she lies to her employers and says she's 18, because if she told them they're her real age, then she wouldn't be able to work there. And if she wasn't able to work, then she wouldn't be able to provide for her and her brother, because her mother at some point previously had died, meaning she's the only family that her little brother has left. She's the only provider for the two of them, so she kind of has to lie. Hina and Hodaka happen upon one another when Hina gives a homeless and very hungry Hodaka a burger from the place she works at. So she's working in a fast food place. He's obviously sitting there very hungry. She sneaks him a burger, and he's really appreciative. And without any spoilers, because I really recommend watching this movie, so I'm not going to be talking about very important things that happen in the plot. Without any specific spoilers, Hina and Hodaka begin to spend a lot of time together. They support one another. He meets her little brother and they become friends, and they slowly start falling in love. The raw emotions and struggles that these two protagonists deal with are just so incredibly heart-wrenching. It is so raw and visceral. It took all of my strength and a bit of pausing in order to not cry. I don't like crying at things. I think that's just kind of a guy thing. I don't like crying at media, but I do get teary-eyed. So it took a lot of effort for me to not cry at this movie. Hodaka gets in trouble with and has to run from the police multiple times during the film, because again, he's a minor, he's not really supposed to be here on his own. And he just kind of gets into a lot of trouble in general. One of these instances directly revolves around him going to literally any length necessary in order to be with Hina, this girl that he met and fell in love with. And that sheer dedication, that power of will, just resonated with me very strongly. I don't watch movies too often, just in general. I like watching movies with other people, but movies aren't exactly my thing. However, I am an absolute sucker for a really good love story, which is maybe shocking. This movie had the very real capability of breaking me. I mean, just shattering me. I love this movie so much. I enjoyed the ending a lot. So, for me, when it comes to Weathering with You, giving it a 10 out of 10, no notes. I love this movie. Please watch this movie. It's incredible. It looks beautiful, and it just is beautiful. Now, the next movie I'm going to talk about is the Pokemon 2000 film. And if you know what I'm talking about, shoutouts to you. This movie is peak Pokemon cinema. Literally made in the year 2000, so it's got that very gritty, grainy quality to it. This movie introduces Mewtwo, and Mewtwo was just terrifying in this movie. There's a cold open that's absolutely insane. Mewtwo is very not happy that he exists and is being experimented on and trapped up in this lab. So he destroys the entire lab because he can. He has incredibly strong psychic powers, so he just blows up this lab that made him. It is terrifying. When I was watching it as a kid, I was like, oh my goodness, this guy's scary. What the heck is going on? Why is everything exploding? This movie is way too tense to be a Pokemon movie at times. But it honestly does it so well that I really love this movie. There's something about the time period and how the movie looks. It just feels right. It just feels natural. Like, yeah, this should be out for this time period, and this makes sense. There's also Mew, who's in this movie. Mew is an absolute bastard. Mew is a master at trolling and rage baiting. The original rage baiter. At one point, it fakes Mewtwo out, thinking Mewtwo's attack, just completely sends it flying and takes him out. He just comes back a few seconds later. Nothing's wrong. He's happy. He's having the time of his life. Mew is an absolute menace. There's a plot point in this film about Pokemon being cloned. It's very unsettling because all the Pokemon that end up getting cloned fight themselves. And that's so sad to watch. Even Pikachu, your main guy, everybody knows Pikachu. Even Pikachu has a clone that he has to fight. He doesn't want to fight him though. But this evil Pikachu, he slaps the hell out of Pikachu. And it's so sad to watch because Pikachu's like a chill dude that doesn't like wanting to hurt people. You know, he's a Pokemon. Just kind of does what he's told, but he's generally very nice. I'm talking about Pikachu as if it's a real person, but you know, I've watched Pokemon for a long time. So for me, he is a real person. Pikachu is real to me. After the main events of the movie happen, the two Pikachus, they're chill after everything's said and done. So even though he does slap the hell out of him, this evil Pikachu, later it's fine. No hard feelings or anything. Also in this movie, Ash, you know, your main character, everyone might know Ash, probably. Ash dies. He just dies, straight up. He gets caught between an attack from Mew and Mewtwo. He steps into the middle of it, trying to get them to stop fighting, and he becomes stone. He just becomes a statue, and he falls on the ground. Having to watch the scene of Pikachu slowly crawling up to his lifeless body. He's so concerned for his best friend. He's making the saddest noises possible. He's bawling his eyes out after realizing Ash is gone. It is literally so sad that it makes every other Pokemon and person in the arena that they were fighting in, for whatever reason. I'm not going to get into it, just because it's so complex. I don't really want to talk about it. All of the people in the Pokemon in this arena stop fighting and just cry. It's so sad to watch Pikachu. Everyone just starts crying. Even Mewtwo. He's a very angry dude. I feel like even he knows he kind of fucked up. He's not very happy. Because Ash was just trying to make everyone stop fighting and was trying to do the right thing. And then, you know, he dies for it. All of the Pokemon cry so much. And this is completely real, by the way, when I say this. All of the Pokemon cry so much that their tears come together, and the magic of tears and friendship unfreeze Ash from his stone prison. And he's just completely fine. Like, no side effects at all. He turns into stone, probably stops breathing, but he's fine. And I think that's really funny. It is such an iconic moment to me, watching Ash just get turned into a statue. It is still ingrained in my brain. There's not a lot of things in this movie that make sense, but I would be foolish to not call it entertaining. So for me, Pokemon 2000 gets a 9 out of 10. If you cry enough, all your problems go away. That's what I learned from this movie. Now, there's a few other movies that I kind of want to talk about, but I'm not going to because there's just so many that I could keep adding on that I would never stop. But a few I'd like to mention. Studio Ghibli movies are very popular, I feel like, even in America. And they have been for the longest time. A couple of those include Ponyo, which is a very weird movie. I could talk a lot about a Ponyo and how weird it is, but there's Ponyo, there's My Neighbor Totoro, there's Kiki's Delivery Service, there's Howl's Moving Castle, there's Princess Mononoke. A lot of these movies are very enjoyable. Some of them came out during the 90s, so they're very specific in how they look. You know, they're dated, but I think they're still enjoyable. Like Princess Mononoke is very odd looking, but it's still very pretty. And there's also a lot of gore in that movie. Like, that's very surprising. I think some dude gets his arm like shot off by a bow and arrow, and it just shows all of that. It shows that kind of stuff, and I was like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. What happened to this dude? It is very entertaining to watch how media kind of was framed in the 90s and the early 2000s. It's very different from now. So now I'm going to start talking about a few shows or series that I really enjoy. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. This is my number one anime of all time. I love this show so much. I grew up watching it. I watch it so often. I've watched it so often. I've watched it with other people. I've watched it on my own. The concept of this anime is, in my opinion, phenomenal. It's executed, really consistency. So like the power system, it makes sense in certain ways. The world of Full Metal Alchemist is just very cool. It is very put together. It is very well thought out. There's not like a bunch of lore that you can speculate about and wonder, oh, what was this that they were trying to say? Because a lot of the lore actually just gets explained in the show. But it's just a really cool world to see. And the system of alchemy is really cool. And it's very versatile. So there's not too many characters that end up doing the same thing as another character. It does happen. To be fair, it does happen sometimes. Like people just, take rocks from the ground and use them as an attack. So that happens a decent amount because it's just kind of makes sense. Use what you have around you. I think the law of equivalent exchange is really cool. It is known pretty widely in my opinion. So that's what that came from, Fullmetal Alchemist. You have to give something in order to get something back of equal value. This show examines a lot of really deep themes, like what is a human soul worth, if anything? What does it mean to be human? Can someone be completely unredeemable? What is good? What is evil? So many more of these types of really interesting themes to think about. Lots of incredible characters that go along with it. There are a lot of characters, but each one I think has a lot of depth and actual purpose throughout the show. I don't think there are many characters that have zero purpose in this show, if any. Every character in the show has some sort of part to play or is important to our main cast in such a way that, were worth existing. My favorite characters are actually two pairs. You have Roy Mustang, the Flame Alchemist, and Riza Hawkeye, last name Hawkeye. Also title Hawkeye, I believe, so that's very interesting. In addition to those two, you have the homunculus Greed and the Prince Ling Yao, I think his name is, last name Yao. He comes from a different country than everybody else, called Xing. And the main country of Fullmetal Alchemist is, I believe, Amestris. So this other guy comes from a completely different country. And he just kind of comes out of nowhere. But it's really interesting because he comes from nowhere, and he's just like a very important character randomly. Greed, the homunculus, is an incredibly believable anti-hero. And what I mean by that is that his goals are consistent to his methods. Everything he does has a reason. The things he does make sense in his ideology. He has really cool abilities. You just end up rooting for Greed throughout the show, even if technically he's not a protagonist or a quote-unquote good guy. Ling is a surprisingly essential character with skills completely unreliant on the anime's main power system, so when there are some instances where the alchemy system is just sort of turned off, nobody's able to do alchemy, he's really important there because he's one of the ones that can actually fight really well. Then you have Mustang and Hawkeye. They have a really wonderful dynamic. Mustang, the former, is simultaneously one of the strongest and most useless characters in the show, depending on certain circumstances. And these circumstances are relevant to the power system of Fullmetal Alchemist. I believe I mentioned he's the Flame Alchemist, so his powers involve fire. And there's a consistent running gag in the show that whenever he gets wet in any sort of way, his powers don't work. So if it's raining outside, he's completely useless. But if it's not raining outside, and he is in peak condition, and nothing is holding him back, he is easily one of the strongest characters in the show, and I think that's really funny. Because when you have an overpowered character, you have to do your best to sort of make sure they don't solo the entire universe, so that's what ends up happening. Either he, for whatever reason, he's not able to use his alchemy, or natural conditions exist that make it so that he is not as strong. So that's Mustang, and then there's Hawkeye, who is incredibly reliable. She's the straight man to Mustang's kind of unhinged self. He's also kind of serious, but he's also very unserious in a lot of ways. She is incredibly skilled at what she does. She doesn't use the main power system of Fullmetal Alchemist at all. She uses guns. And she's really good at using guns. So I guess she's like Black Widow from the Avengers, but blonde and more attractive, in my opinion. She's a really cool character. I like her. She's definitely one of my favorite female characters in all anime, just because she's not just woman character who is strong and is the straight man to this really strong guy. She's also just very human, and she's an important part of the show. She has a lot of really good moments that are emotional. I rewatch Fullmetal Alchemist at least once every other year or so I watch it often. Even though I've watched it so many times, I still love watching it. It may be over 60 episodes, but each episode is worth watching in my opinion. So if you haven't watched Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, or maybe you didn't watch it completely, I recommend watching it in its entirety. You will enjoy some part of it. There's no doubt in my mind that you will find something you enjoy, a character you enjoy. Even something as simple as that. I think the show is phenomenal. So I give Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood a 9.5 out of 10. There are some times where the humor can miss. I think that's one of the few flaws of the show. Sometimes the humor is just odd. And I mean, it was early 2000s, 2010s type deal, so, you know, it's not perfect. The next show I'd like to talk about is Hunter x Hunter. The series is really old, like really old, 90s. It is still going even till this day. Current day, 2025. There are still chapters being put out. This show, this manga, has a very dedicated fan base. They are very patient, because from what I understand, the author has health issues often. So he tries his best to write chapters as often as he can. But still, he kind of has to take care of himself, and, you know, that makes sense. So this fan base is very patient. They enjoy what they are given when they are given it. The power system is relatively simple. You only have to watch a couple of explanations to really understand everything. It's also really flexible, but in the end, everyone loses to a nuke. At least that's what I got from watching this show. It doesn't matter how strong you are. If you get nuked, you die. There's a lot of very unique and cool abilities, very unique characters. There's very distinct arcs with very different power scaling. So our characters start out not as strong, but they're still able to get through all of the challenges. And then, you know, you get the main power system introduced, and you just get stronger and stronger and stronger throughout all of these arcs. And I think it does a good job at scaling. There's one arc that I think is a bit, how to say, lopsided in terms of the power. But for the most part, I think it's enjoyable. There are a lot of characters in Hunter x Hunter. They are introduced often, and then subsequently killed off, typically, somewhere down the line. Or they might go very long periods of time without having any attention given to them. There's 4 main characters. There's Gon, who's the main guy. He's 12, I believe. He just kind of wants to find his dad and become a great hunter, and he wants to find him after he becomes a great hunter, but he ends up finding him before he becomes a great hunter, and he also, like, dies, but he's fine now. And I know that doesn't make sense, so you have to watch the show in order to understand that. But yeah, his main goal of finding his dad after becoming a great hunter just kind of doesn't happen. He just finds him. There's also Killua. He is also 12, and he is kind of just doing his own thing. He's just kind of his own guy. He likes making friends, and he's also an assassin. He's a kind of a freak, but, you know, he's a child freak. Not like in that way, but he is a child and a freak. Go figure. There's also another guy. He's like, I don't know how old he is. He's in mid-20s, maybe his 30s. I don't think he is, though. Maybe mid-20s. He's just this random guy, it seems like. His name is Leorio, and he wants to be a lawyer. I believe that is his arc. It was either a lawyer or a doctor. One of those things. I can't remember off the top of my head, but he wants to be one of those things. And yeah, that's what he wants to do. He's a main character. The final main character, I think, is my favorite. The one with the most depth, in my opinion. There's Kurapika. I think he's really cool. He has very interesting powers, and he is just someone you do not want to get on the bad side of. And there's a specific group that gets on the wrong side of this guy, and he just goes apeshit on them. And just destroys all of them. He is literally the number one op for these people. The power system in this show is very flexible, like I said. You can kind of figure out your own sort of ability based on your innate power, your innate abilities. But he says, screw that, I'm gonna come up with my own shit. And he creates this, like, super overpowered list of abilities that only work if he's able to fight one of these specific people. So yeah, he's strong still, even without his powers, but if he fights one of these people in this group, just demolishes them. It's very funny, because he's just kind of full of hatred. That's his character. He's a guy with a lot of hate. But he's not like Sasuke from Naruto, where it's like, I just hate everything. He just really hates these specific people. For Hunter x Hunter, I would give this show an 8.5 out of 10. Every main character but Leorio is born with immense innate talent, so just get a better spawn to be successful, I guess. Sorry to Leorio. You go do your own thing. He does get powers in the show, very randomly. I really don't know what Leorio's deal is. He's just kind of there. He's just a guy. The next show I would like to talk about is Attack on Titan. The really important show that I talked about earlier that really made anime sort of kick up in popularity, in my opinion. Attack on Titan is a masterclass of moral dilemmas and reoccurring themes, all hidden within a very unsuspecting wrapping of characters fighting terrifying monsters. That's the sort of initial premise. You're just characters trying to survive and fight these terrifying monsters, and you're trying to save humanity. You start out just trying to keep humanity alive inside the walls of this place where they live, called Paradise. Paradis. It's paradise for them basically, but it's not paradise at all. So we start out just trying to keep people alive, and we end up with full-blown geopolitical planning and warfare that happens over the course of basically a season, even though it's sprinkled all throughout the show, and there's definitely hints. So that's why I think it's a really good show. So the author, doesn't just pull shit out of nowhere. He makes it sort of clear that something's different here. But yeah, it just kind of changes very rapidly in the final sort of seasons. Very different show from what you start out as. There's a character in Attack on Titan that is one of my favorites. Her name is Gabby. She's an incredibly well-written character, in my opinion. A lot of people don't like Gabby, and I understand why, because she commits murder like several times and several war crimes. So yeah, she's not like the best person ever, but I think she's a very poignant example of how indoctrination can be so ingrained into the young people's minds, that this idea of shared humanity just doesn't even exist in her anymore. She does not care if you are a person, because in her view, you are not a person if you are not within a specific class of people or a specific group of people. So she does not care. She will kill you. And that's how she starts off in the show. And then she has a very, very just strong shift. She has a lot of this indoctrination ingrained into her brain, and it's challenged throughout the show after she figures out that, wow, people are just kind of people sometimes. And all the people that I've killed are like people who had families and friends and were just trying to do what they thought was right. And yeah, she kills a lot of people. The first thing we ever see her do is commit a war crime, I believe. After she does a little bit of an explanation of what's happening in the first episode, she's introduced in, and then the next thing she does is commit war crimes. And I think that's really funny. Not that war crimes are funny, but just the fact that, she's 13, 14, however old these characters are, and she just goes and commits war crimes. And she's very good at it. I think one of my favorite characters in Attack on Titan is Peak. Peak is by far my favorite 2D girl of any series, and she does it with a quarter of the screen time that any of the other main characters receive. I love Peak. She is super intelligent, she's super kind, she's really skilled, very deceptively skilled at what she does, and she's really important to the end of the show, and I was surprised at how important she was. She's very endearing. You just kind of like her after you observe her, just sort of existing. She's awesome. She blows any other character out of the water, in my view. Peak is just built different. She is peak. Peak is peak woman. End of story. Peak is peak. The amount of debate that can be had, and has been had, over Attack on Titan's overarching themes and messages is vast. It's very relevant to the modern era, in my opinion. It talks a lot about shared hatred and what it means to have that shared hatred towards this other group. You know, that mob mentality thing, tribalism. It talks a lot about that, and it shows you the consequences of that type of mindset. In my opinion, we deal with a lot of that right now, so I think people should watch Attack on Titan and maybe think a bit about the implications that they talk about. Attack on Titan is really, really close to being my number one favorite anime of all time. It just barely doesn't get there, though. It just barely doesn't beat out Fullmetal Alchemist. But it is easily my number 2. I also will give Attack on Titan a 9.5 out of 10. Isayama, the author of Attack on Titan, this is a plea to you. Please write more in the universe. Please write more things of Attack on Titan. Maybe just make things. Make more things. He's a really good author. The next show I would like to talk about is One Piece. Cue all of the One Piece memes. That's one thing I think I should mention. Anime has a lot of memes in popular culture. Very underestimated, in my opinion. There's a lot of memes about anime. Very well-known things. Literally memes don't have very long lives. They typically exist for a couple of weeks or something, if a week. And one of them was the One Piece. The One Piece is real. And I think that's funny, because it's literally just a line from the show. Anyways, One Piece has really well-written characters. Very, very oddly written characters as well. Very odd-looking characters. And I think the ways that some of the characters look are very memorable and are probably made that way intentionally. There's a couple of the characters, usually the female characters, that just kind of look odd. Their proportions aren't exactly normal. So that's what people typically remember about this art style of One Piece, is that the female characters just kind of look weird. So, yes, that is true. It's a bit unnecessary at times how odd they look, but I think that the author does that purposefully. They send a lot of messages about, belonging, because One Piece is a lot about belonging somewhere. Found family is very important to One Piece. Doesn't matter what you look like, you can still be accepted and you can be important, I think is generally what they're trying to get at. My favorite character from One Piece is probably Trafalgar D. Waterlaw, I believe is his full name, but they just call him Law. His powers are just insanely busted. He is so overpowered, it is insane that I think he has ever lost a fight, seemingly. I don't think he's ever technically lost a fight. If he doesn't beat them, somebody beats them very closely after. He's very strong. He's a very good guy, I think, that helps the main cast out a lot throughout the multiple arcs. He's surprisingly important to the overall plot of One Piece. And the thing about One Piece is that it has been going for so long that the original plan for One Piece has changed a lot. So typically he was supposed to be this anti-hero villain sort of character, I think. But later down the line, the author changed his mind and he was like, actually this character is going to have this sort of role, so now he's just helping out our main crew a lot. There are so many arcs that center around him or what he's trying to do, so it is surprising how important he is. He's also part of the D clan, which is important to One Piece. And if you haven't watched One Piece, that probably makes no sense to you. But yeah, he's actually a very surprising dude. Very surprisingly important. The overwhelming themes, I think, surrounding One Piece is freedom. And I also already mentioned found family. Freedom. The freedom to do whatever you want. The freedom to choose your companions and choose your own destiny. Which is why I think it's really cool that people use the Jolly Roger from the Straw Hats as a sign of rebellion. Because, like, that's what One Piece is all about. Is finding freedom and getting freedom. It's really cool to me that the Jolly Roger just pops up in random places and you can just point at it and go, look, One Piece. There are a couple of main factions in One Piece, and a lot of them are seemingly cut and dry, but they're actually very complex. There's the pirates and the marines, I think, are your main two that you establish and say, these are the main kind of people fighting. There's obviously a lot of behind-the-scenes sort of actors that are important, but it's mainly, pirates versus marines. All of these pirates, all of these marines have their own individual belief systems. They have their own senses of justice that drive their actions. So there's no purely evil or good side. These Navy admirals from the Marines are supposed to be these upholders of justice and righteousness, and they're supposed to do the right thing, but they can be very heartless killers, very easily. There's pirates that fight for the sake of others, completely unrelated to them, like our main crew. They're just, they're not bad people. They're good people, but they're also pirates. And I think that is very interesting. The main character, Luffy, his whole ideology is based around being the most free possible. He wants everyone to be free, so that gives him a lot of allies and a lot of enemies. He's trying to free people, and he's also trying to be the most free himself. So if he can take people along on his way and make them more free, typically he does that. I haven't watched all of One Piece. I have watched most of it, though, or read most of it in some shape or form. So I really enjoy One Piece. It's very long, I get that, but I think people should watch it. So One Piece, I'm gonna give One Piece a 9 out of 10. Buggy will become king of the pirates somehow. And if you know what that means, shoutouts to you. We have reached the part of the show where I typically go into what do we do now? What can we do? But now, for this episode, I think it'll be kind of different because it's not like a problem or anything. I'm just talking about anime, Anime is very divisive, I think, at times. Understandably so at times. There are a lot of anime that are really weird. And I can acknowledge that. A lot of anime, a good percentage of anime, maybe like 80% of anime, are just kind of weird to a lot of people overseas. And, that's just how we view it. It's not within our culture to have anime and, what is anime? What does it stand for? To us, it's just media. So we look at it and it can be very weird to us at times. Because some of it is weird. But I don't think anime is, a very bad thing. I think anime is awesome. I think it's just another way that people can represent their ideas and the worlds that they want to create. They are not inherently very geared towards one population or the other. I feel like anime can be typically, anime can be consumed by anybody. There's definitely some anime that shouldn't be consumed by younger demographics, but I think for older groups of people, anime can be consumed by anybody, and someone can probably find an anime that they like, or just characters that they like. There are a few anime that I wanted to talk about, but that I don't think I have the time to talk about because there's just so much to get into about each anime, and this episode would end up being way too long, and I would have to edit way too much. So maybe I'll split this into 2, or later down the line do another sort of thing like this. But a lot of anime are very enjoyable. There's a few that, like, I wanted to mention. There's Naruto, there's Dragon Ball, Jujutsu Kaisen. I really like those anime, and I kind of wanted to talk about a couple of them, but I'm just not going to be able to, in this episode at least. Jujutsu Kaisen is very interesting in my opinion. It is a much more recent anime, and I think it is remarkably popular. It's like Attack on Titan levels of popular. It has sort of made it into public consciousness. Like I said, it collabed with Fortnite. If you've collabed with Fortnite, that means you're cool. So Jujutsu Kaisen is just a very well-known anime now, I think. There's a very cool system of just how it operates. I think that Jujutsu Kaisen does its power system pretty well. Some things are bullshit in my opinion. Some of the things in Jujutsu Kaisen are stupid in my opinion. Some characters are very dumb in my opinion, and in terms of how strong they are. But for the most part, the power system is understandable, and you make your abilities stronger when you talk about them. Like if you tell your opponent how your ability works, it makes it stronger somehow. And like, that's cool. Imagine if you went to go beat somebody up and you told them exactly how well you were going to beat them up, in exactly what sort of way, and then you just do it, and even better than you even talked about. That's Jujutsu Kaisen. That is what Jujutsu Kaisen is about. A lot of the characters in Jujutsu Kaisen die. That's just kind of how it goes. That's also the case for Attack on Titan. I didn't really talk about that. There's a lot of characters in Attack on Titan, and most of them die. And even the author himself has said, yeah, I didn't really commit to keeping, every character alive. There was probably some part where I considered killing them off somehow. A lot of characters die in Attack on Titan, and a lot of characters die in Jujutsu Kaisen. They get introduced and then they die. Some of them very quickly after they get introduced. Some of them last for a while and then die. And then some of them maybe die, but we don't know for sure. I don't know. You'll have to watch it in order to see or read it, because I've read it. Jujutsu Kaisen, I'll give it a rating. I give Jujutsu Kaisen an 8.5 out of 10. There's a character that has an ability where he just sort of gambles, and if he rolls well, then he gets stronger, and I think that's awesome. So gamble more is what I learned. I think anime is going to keep getting more popular as time goes on, and it's going to become more mainstream. I don't know exactly how far anime can go. It is still looked at as very odd, and it is still looked at as kind of for weirdos by a lot of the internet. I understand that somewhat, but I also think anime is really cool, and I don't think that people should feel bad about liking anime, because that's kind of how it is, or how it was at least for a long time. You didn't talk about anime if you liked anime. And so here I am talking about my favorite anime because I think it should be talked about. It's just media. It's just something to consume. It's just different from what you might know or what people generally have an idea of or consume. I think anime are really enjoyable and can have a lot of deep things that they can say, even if they're animated. Just because something is animated doesn't mean it can't have a really good message or be really enjoyable. But also, just because it's animated doesn't mean it's just for kids. There's a lot of people that try to argue about animated movies that are not very good, and they say, well, it's just for kids, it doesn't need to be perfect, it doesn't need to make sense. I call bullshit on that. You are coping in some of those instances. I think you are just trying to make up for why your movie sucks. Your movie sucks. No, not really. But there's a lot of people that try to say, oh, just because a movie is animated, it doesn't mean it has to make sense. I don't think so. I think there's a lot of animated media that makes a lot of sense. And just because you weren't able to do it doesn't mean it's inherently bad, but you were probably capable of doing something better. Talk about anime if you want to talk about anime, you know? I think that we should talk about the things that we enjoy, and it can be hard at times to find people that enjoy the things that we enjoy. That's why I'm doing this. I don't get a lot of opportunities to talk about the things that I enjoy the most, because they are not always very mainstream or very cool, or not many people know about them, and that's kind of sad at times. I love talking about the things that I enjoy. I love discussing themes and debating people on, what this type of thing might have been trying to get at. Moral of the story, if you enjoy anime, talk about anime. If you enjoy something that is not very cool, still talk about it anyways. It's okay to like things. There are a lot of things that people view as very cringe, and for most of those things, I would say people are just kind of overreacting. But for some of those things, yeah, it is a little cringe. And so, I joke around and I say, we should bring back bullying. And that's just not really what I mean, because, bullying isn't good. But there are some times when I look at people who enjoy something and I think, you've gone a bit too far. You've gotten a bit too used to not being made fun of. Don't be mean to people, but if they're being really weird about the thing that they like, yeah, you can put them in their place a little bit. As a treat. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.